It was the kind of morning that crept in softly. The sky still wore a layer of mist, and the lavender bushes outside were kissed with dew. Inside a small white cottage nestled at the edge of a sleepy town, a woman moved slowly through her kitchen, not out of weakness or fragility, but out of peace. She had nowhere to rush to, no one waiting impatiently, no clock to beat, only the sound of the kettle warming and a soft bird's call just beyond her window. She is 75 years old. She lives alone, entirely alone. There are no visiting children, no grandchildren's toys scattered across the floor, no husband calling her from the other room. There is only her, and the life she has built quietly, deliberately, in this little sanctuary of her own. To outsiders, this life must seem sad, lonely even. The mailman who delivers her letters every Monday noticed the silence, the stillness. He never stays long. The woman across the street once remarked to a neighbor, "Poor thing, no one should grow old alone like that." Even the young girl who helps her tend the garden once asked with genuine curiosity, "Do you ever feel lonely living by yourself like this?" And the old woman just smiled. A smile not of pity, not of sadness, but of knowing something they didn't. Knowing that this life she lives now is not one she was forced into. It's one she chose. You see, people tend to pity what they don't understand. They see an elderly woman living alone and assume she must be quietly suffering. But what they don't know is that she has already lived through louder, more crowded forms of loneliness. She's been in rooms filled with people who never truly saw her. She's laughed at dinners where no one asked how she was doing, really. She spent years in the background, behind a husband's ambition or a child's needs, forgetting what her own name sounded like when she said it just for herself. And now, finally, she gets to live on her terms. Each day is crafted slowly, lovingly. She wakes with the sun, not an alarm. She makes her tea just the way she likes it, without needing to ask anyone else how they want theirs. She sits by the window and watches birds without feeling the need to check her phone or respond to anyone. She reads novels she's already read a dozen times, not because she's forgotten the endings, but because she finally has time to enjoy the journey again. There's a rhythm here, a softness, a dignity in slowness. She keeps a garden, not to impress anyone, but to be reminded that life still blooms, even after 70 springs. She writes in her journal not for posterity, but to hear her own voice echo back at her. She cooks her favorite meals in portions, just for one, and eats them with gratitude instead of longing. She doesn't feel lonely because she's learned the difference between being alone and feeling alone. And that distinction, it's everything. There was a time, not so long ago, when the idea of being alone terrified her. Not just the silence of an empty room, but the silence inside herself. The kind that arrives at night when the laughter fades, when the last voice on the phone hangs up, and you're left staring at the ceiling asking, "Who am I if no one is watching?" In her younger years, she feared solitude, like some people fear the dark. She filled her life with people, with noise, with things to do. She hosted dinners, joined clubs, volunteered for every event she could. Not because she loved the hustle, but because she couldn't stand the quiet. She stayed in relationships that didn't see her, held on to friendships that drained her, agreed to things she didn't want to do, just to avoid the ache of being alone on a Friday night. Because somewhere deep inside, she believed what many of us are taught to believe, that being loved means being needed. That being alone means being unwanted, that a woman without people around her is somehow incomplete. And so she tried for many years to be everything to everyone. She was the friend who never said no, the mother who always answered the phone, the partner who made herself smaller so someone else could feel big. She smiled even when she was tired. She said, "I'm fine," even when she felt invisible. And every time she put someone else first, she thought, "At least I'm not alone." But slowly, quietly, she began to notice something strange. Even surrounded by people, she still felt lonely. Even in a crowded room, she felt like a ghost. Even in conversation, she felt unheard. And that's when she realized, Being with others doesn't protect you from loneliness. Sometimes it amplifies it. The loneliest moments of her life weren't spent in solitude, they were spent pretending she was okay in the company of those who didn't really see her. It wasn't a single event that changed her. It was a slow unraveling, a gradual understanding that her fear of being alone had cost her something deeper, the relationship with herself. So one day, she did something simple, but brave. She declined an invitation to a gathering she didn't want to attend. She took herself out for coffee, alone. She went for a walk, without music, without company, and just listened to the sound of her breath. It was awkward at first, unfamiliar, but with every step she began to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Presence, not performance, not obligation, just presence. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to explain herself. She didn't need someone else to validate her existence. She was beginning to come home to herself. At first, she didn't even realize it was happening. There was no grand revelation, no lightning strike moment, just quiet mornings that felt softer, afternoons that no longer needed filling, evenings where silence wasn't something to fight, but something to rest in. The world outside kept spinning, noisy, urgent, and fast. But her world slowed down, and in that slowness she found a rhythm that felt like hers. She began waking up not with dread, but with curiosity. What would this quiet day bring? Maybe a walk down the lane where the leaves were beginning to turn. Maybe a visit to the little bakery where the owner remembered her name. Maybe just time in the garden, not to do anything, but simply to be. And for the first time in decades, she didn't feel the need to prove anything. Not to her children, not to sister, to society, not even to herself. She wasn't chasing approval. She was listening. Listening to what her body needed, to what her spirit longed for, to what her soul had been whispering all along. You are enough. The world had told her that beauty had an expiration date, that relevance fades after retirement, that a woman alone must be a woman who's been left behind. But none of that felt true anymore. Not when she was brushing her hair slowly, savoring the softness of silver strands. Not when she was lighting candles in the evening just for herself. Not when she danced in the kitchen while her soup simmered, smiling at memories only she remembered. There was a strange kind of freedom in no longer needing to be anyone else. She could cry when she felt moved, laugh when she felt joy, speak when she had something to say, and stay silent when she didn't. This wasn't loneliness. This was intimacy with life itself. And perhaps most beautifully, she began to notice that being alone didn't mean being disconnected. She formed new friendships, slow-growing, tender ones, with people who valued depth over small talk. She shared letters, not texts, long walks, not rushed coffee dates, moments that lingered instead of passed. And when others asked, "Don't you ever feel lonely?" she would smile and say, "I used to when I didn't know who I was, but now I rather enjoy the company I keep." It didn't take wealth. It didn't take travel or luxury or a big social circle. All it took were a few small choices, repeated with care, held with intention, and honored like sacred vows to herself. That's how she filled her days. Each morning began the same way. She would make her bed slowly, smoothing the blankets with hands that had held so much, lost so much, and still continued on. Then she'd open the windows, not just to let in air, but to let in life. Birdsong, morning breeze, the scent of damp earth and rising sun. Then came tea, not rushed, not for caffeine, but for comfort. She had a favorite cup, chipped at the rim but loved anyway, and while the kettle hummed, she would hum too, a quiet melody from her youth, like a conversation with the past. She'd sit by the window, warm cup in hand, and write. Not a journal exactly, more like a conversation with herself. "Dear heart," she'd often begin, "what do you need today?" And the day would unfold gently from there. Sometimes it was a walk through the woods, sometimes just tending to her plants, whispering encouragement to the ones that were struggling. She believed plants, like people, responded to kindness, not just water and light. She didn't wait for birthdays or holidays to celebrate. If the sky was particularly beautiful, she'd make soup. If the rain came, she'd light candles. If she felt lonely, yes, it still happened now and then, she'd play a record that reminded her of a time when she felt most herself. Not to escape the sadness, but to sit beside it. That was the biggest change. She no longer ran from her feelings. She welcomed them in, like old friends. On Sundays, she'd write letters to old companions, friends from school, distant cousins, even pen pals she met through a local senior network. Not all replied, but that wasn't the point. She wrote because it made her feel connected, because in a world that values speed, she had learned to value depth. She had learned that life could be full, not in the way society measures, but in the way your soul does. She wasn't busy. She was whole. And so when someone said, "But don't you miss having people around?" she'd pause and then say, "I don't miss the noise. I miss the ones who truly saw me. And when I miss them, I write, I remember, and that's enough." Her rituals weren't grand, but they were hers, and that made them sacred. For most of her life, she feared being lonely, and why wouldn't she? Society had taught her that a woman alone is a woman who has been left behind, that silence is something to be avoided, that aging alone is a kind of failure, a quiet punishment for not having done life right. But here's the truth no one ever told her. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of connection with yourself. And once she began to reconnect with the quiet voice inside her, she discovered something radical. She wasn't lonely. She was free. You see, she stopped waiting. Stopped waiting for a knock on the door. Stopped waiting for the phone to ring. Stopped waiting for someone to notice her, to validate her, to rescue her from the quiet. Instead, she started noticing herself. She noticed how she felt when she was at peace. She noticed what made her light up and what drained her. She noticed the way her body softened when she stopped apologizing for taking up space. She even noticed the shape of her own thoughts, how some were cruel, echoes of the past, and how others were tender, like whispered encouragements from within. And the more she noticed, the more she realized she was never truly alone. There was always someone there, herself, waiting to be seen, waiting to be held with kindness, waiting to be invited back home. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and cast the whole cottage in a golden glow, she stood before her mirror, not to fix anything, not to criticize or compare, but just to look. And for the first time in decades, she didn't see an aging woman losing relevance. She saw a life lived fully, every wrinkle a chapter, every gray hair a witness to survival. She touched her own cheek and whispered, "You're still here. You've made it, and you are more beautiful now than you've ever been." In a world that told her she needed to be surrounded to be fulfilled, she had done the unthinkable. She had fallen in love with the quiet, with her days, with the woman she had become. And that was enough. So here she is, a woman, 75 years old, living alone in a cottage that is small but full, of light, of scent, of quiet joy. To the outside world, it may still look like solitude, but to her it's sanctuary. Every room has stories, every object a memory, every day a reason to stay. She doesn't fear being forgotten anymore, because she has remembered herself. She no longer worries whether others will understand her life, because she understands it deeply, and that's what matters now. There's something sacred about a woman who chooses her own rhythm, something powerful in a life not lived for applause but for truth. She is not lonely, she is not lost, she is not waiting. She is living fully, deliberately, softly, and joyfully, on her own terms. And maybe as you listen to her story, you saw a part of yourself in her. Maybe you too have feared the silence. Maybe you've been surrounded and still felt alone. Maybe you've reached a point in life where you're asking, what if I've been chasing the wrong things all along? If so, you're not alone, and it's never too late to come home to yourself. In fact, What if the best chapter of your life begins not in the company of others, but in the presence of your own soul? If this story touched something in you, I invite you to stay a while. Subscribe to Golden Pathways, because here we honor the beauty of growing older. We talk about what others avoid, and we walk this gentle journey together. And if you feel called, leave a comment below. Tell us, what does solitude mean to you now? What small joy fills your quiet moments? Your words might be the light someone else needs today. Thank you for being here. You are never too old to begin again. You are never too late to matter.